Welcome to the morning after the Final Four, or I guess I should say the weekend of the Final Four. I'm your host, Jared Smith. Thank you for tuning in. Episode 30. TMA turns the big 3-0 today. Very excited for that. Of course, coming up on this show, we will react to Saturday night's Final Four. I will give you my pick and prediction for the national championship game on Monday. We'll dive into a couple things that I believe interest me about that game and maybe a couple places that you can look for to try to see who's going to win it. We'll recap the women's national championship and the drama that was over the weekend between South Carolina and UConn. Gino Auriemma certainly some interesting choices after his Final Four loss with the post-game handshake to Dawn Staley. I'm sure you've seen that circulating the headlines. I'll give you my brief reaction to it. And a piece of NFL news as we officially turn the page. This will be our last college basketball show of the season. We will officially turn the page to the NFL draft. I've actually begun some pretty heavy prep for the NFL draft. I'm going to be releasing an NFL draft betting guide with some prior data and my personal mock draft and some analysis of what we could see and what we have seen in drafts past. Very excited to talk about that, and I'll get to it a little bit later in the show. And next week, starting on next week's show, is when we will have a lot of NFL topics, a lot of NFL draft talk. But let's start with the Final Four. Obviously, that is front and center Saturday night. Michigan just obliterated Arizona. And I know a lot of people thought that was going to be one of me included, I said it was going to be like the NFC Championship game, and I thought Arizona was game to raise their level, but they really didn't answer the bell. Michigan played at a very high level for the majority of that game, and we just saw Arizona kind of similar to they did in the first half against Purdue, and that's what I said on last week's show. I said Arizona at their ceiling, I think, has the best team, but we just haven't seen their ceiling for 40 full minutes. We didn't see it against Purdue. They were fortunate that night they were facing Purdue. They actually scored less points in the first half against Purdue than they did on Saturday night against Michigan. But the difference was on Saturday night, they weren't facing Purdue, who kind of shriveled up and crawled into a hole in the second half of that game, whereas Michigan continued to play at a very high level, even without their star player, Yaxel Lendenborg. I mean, Michigan is the best of the bunch, no doubt. That's why they opened a massive favorite in the game on Monday night against UConn, who I want to say kind of outlasted Illinois. I don't think the Huskies played an elite game, but they did two things very well, and it's two things that they have done very well throughout the course of the season, especially lately, really late down the stretch, is make threes and not commit turnovers. And they've been able to do those things effectively and prevent the other team from making threes and force turnovers, and that's why they won the game. I think Illinois had open shots, but they just couldn't make them. And I think UConn flustered them. I think the moment was a little bit too big for some of the younger UConn players. Brad Underwood's first trip to the Final Four. Danny Hurley's been there before. Alex Caravan, they've won 2 national championships. They weren't afraid of the moment, whereas I think Illinois had some opportunities to take control of that game at times, but just couldn't get over the hump. Felt like there was a lid on the basket. And I think Illinois, very young team, I think they'll be back, but learning experience for them. UConn really strangled the life out of that game. Really impressive stuff. They won the three-point line, and they won the turnover battle pretty handily. There was a stretch in that game. If you go back to the Elite Eight, the final 10 minutes of the Duke game for UConn, and in the first 26 minutes of the game against Illinois, they did not commit a turnover. They went almost a full 40 minutes of high leverage game time without committing a turnover. Just incredible. And that will be a big factor in the game against Michigan. So let's set the scene for you. UConn and Michigan Monday night. So this was interesting. If you've been following me, you know that I've got some Michigan futures. I had some Arizona futures too. I had a bigger position on Arizona. Unfortunately, that didn't come home. But I did have some Michigan futures. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, I want to get a piece of UConn early, because I do think that the Michigan blowout, right, they were a 5.5 point favorite on the look ahead. I thought maybe we'd get a 6, maybe 6.5. We got a 7.5. MGM flashed 7.5 on Saturday night. I gobbled that up really quick. UConn plus 7.5. Gave that out to my Patreon subscribers on Saturday night. We're down to 6.5 now. It feels like 6 is probably the right number. It feels like the right number was what we were on the look ahead before Saturday's blowout. I'm not massively upgrading Michigan for the blowout against Arizona. I'm upgrading them probably a half point to a point, but I thought going from 5.5 to 7.5 on the look ahead was a bit too heavy for a UConn team that just seems to be this team of destiny, for lack of a better word. I think we close around 6.5. That feels like the right number. I think you keep Illinois or keep UConn flat, even though they beat Illinois. Illinois didn't really play that great. Maybe you upgrade them a half a point, but I think you upgrade Michigan a full point. And that gets us to maybe 6.5. Didn't get us to 7.5. So I thought UConn plus 7.5, good bet. If you can find 7 out there in the market, right, key number in college basketball, I would bet UConn plus 7. And if you can find a 7.5 before Monday night, I think that's a good bet as well. I think there'll be some UConn money in the market. I mean, they're a team of destiny, right? Like everyone wants to bet UConn as a dog. They've just been winning games at a remarkable margin. However, the last thing people saw is that Michigan blowout. And I think that will also get some Michigan money in the market. They deserve to be the favorite. They are the best team in college basketball by a wide margin. They have proven it. They have been unbelievable throughout this stretch run. They were blowing teams out early in the year. Then the Big Ten schedule kind of got to them a little bit. And now they're getting back to blowing teams out in the tournament. They have been absolutely remarkable. Last week on the show, I gave you my coaching power ratings of the Final Four. And I put Dusty May at the top in front of Danny Hurley. And I got a lot of flack for that on social media. I don't think there's a wide gap between those two guys. I don't think it's, Dusty May's running away and hiding from Danny Hurley. But the reason I put May in front is because he's taken 2 different programs to a Final Four in the last 3 years. I think Danny Hurley's an incredible coach. I think he has a chance on Monday night, if they win this game, somehow, some way, to put himself in that Mount Rushmore conversation with the Izzos and the Coach K's and the Wizard of Westwood and all the greats of coaching past, of coaching lore. Down there at UCLA. But I think there's certain level of I want to call it, I don't want to say resiliency. I don't know what the word I'm looking for here. The ability to build a program in today's culture and to then leave and go to another program and have the same amount, if not more success right away. It kind of reminds me of Cignetti, frankly. What he was able to do at JMU and then immediately go to Indiana and win a national title. And we're putting Curt Cignetti in the lore of greatest college football coaches of this generation. So I certainly think Dusty May deserves to be at the top of the list. If they win and they cover, even if they just win on Monday night and they win a national championship, I think he deserves to be the best, considered the best coach in college basketball right now. You want to say Hurley's right there? I'm not going to argue with you. But to not give May the recognition and to not put him at least in the top 3, probably in the top 2 with Hurley right now, I think is silly. And there's obviously a gap between Tommy Lloyd and Brad Underwood. I mean, I think Lloyd, especially, being a relatively young head coach, hasn't had a ton of experience at the head coaching level. And with Underwood just being his first trip to this level with Illinois, I thought they were going to be not outclassed, but certainly both of those teams were outcoached. Definitely Arizona got outcoached. Dusty May brought in baskets to the big house and put them in the middle of the field so his team could get the depth perception right. He was out there during the first game when Michigan played later, scouting Illinois and UConn. He's been to the Final Four before. He had this level of calmness and composure about how Michigan went about their game plan that I thought played out on the floor. Where even after Yaxel got hurt, there was no panic in Michigan. They just handled it, they overcame it, and they looked just as dominant without Yaxel on the floor than with him. And obviously they're better with him. I'm not going to make that argument, but there's a certain level of calmness and composure when your team is prepared, that even when the bad things happen, we got this, yo. And that was the vibe I got from Michigan on Saturday night. UConn has that vibe too. UConn is a team that is unafraid of the moment. And I'm sure Danny Hurley is relishing the underdog narrative, whereas he couldn't really use it against Illinois. It was kind of a pick'em game. I know UConn was a slight underdog, but now they're a big underdog. And now nobody expects them to win. And that's definitely going to be the rallying cry for Danny Hurley on Monday night. I think it's 7, you bet UConn. I think it's 6.5. It's probably a pass. But I would not put it past the Huskies to keep this game close. So that gets us to the keys to the game. 3-pointers and turnovers. I mean, I think if you've been following my work when it comes to college basketball. If you follow my work when it comes to college football, it's yards per play, it's yards per attempt, it's EPA per play, and it's turnover margin. Like, those are the things that I really study. And I try to find those fugazi results where maybe a team didn't deserve to win, and we talk about that on the show every week. We go through all the box scores, and we try to do upgrades and downgrades based off of the results. Well, that's how we do in college basketball too. It's the same process. Handicapping is the same process no matter the sport. It just changes based off the statistics and the metrics that you value. And in this case, it's three-pointers and turnovers. So Michigan has made at least 10 threes in 5 tourney games. All 5 tourney games, they have made at least 10 three-pointers. UConn has held 12 straight opponents to fewer than 10 made threes. So that's your line in the sand for Monday night. If UConn can hold Michigan to single-digit made threes, they are live to win this game, because that's something that they, A, have done really well in this tourney run, and B, that's something that Michigan has done really well, make the three. So who's going to win that three-point battle? Is UConn going to be able to run Michigan off the three-point line? That is going to be a big factor in this game. UConn has only allowed 10 or more made threes 4 times all year. Again, they've held 12 straight opponents to single digits. So here are the 4 games that UConn has allowed double-digit made threes. They beat Providence 103-98 in overtime back in January. They beat Villanova by 8 on January 24th in overtime. They beat Georgetown by 4, did not cover, on February 14th. And then they lost, gave up 91 points to Creighton on February 18th. So again, they are 3-1 in those games. But actually, let me check. I didn't check the ATS. Let me check what the ATS numbers are for them, because I think that's a big one too. My guess is they're 2-2, if not 2-3 ATS, because I don't think they covered the Georgetown game. Obviously, they did not cover against Creighton. Let's take a look. Got covers up right here. I should have looked at this before the show. All right, so the Providence game, they were 9.5-point favorite, didn't cover. The game against Villanova, they were an 11.5-point favorite, didn't cover. The game against Georgetown, 16.5-point favorite, didn't cover. The game against Creighton, 15.5-point favorite, didn't cover. They are 3-1 and 0-4 against the spread when allowing 10 or more threes in a game this year. 0-4 against the spread. That is crucial for UConn. They have to figure out a way to run Michigan off the three-point line. I mentioned the turnover mark, 36 minutes and 27 seconds of game time for UConn from the Elite Eight, last 10 minutes, to the Final Four, the first 26 minutes, without committing a turnover. They have won the turnover margin in 4 of their 5 tourney games. The margin of turnovers in that span is a plus 12. Meanwhile, Michigan, very capable of winning and covering despite losing turnovers. Check this. The Wolverines have not won turnovers since the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tourney against Ohio State. So in that 8-game span, 3 games in the Big Ten tourney, 5 games in the NCAA tourney, they have a negative 17 turnover margin. They are very comfortable losing the turnover battle. They are very comfortable running up and down, playing a little loosey-goosey, knocking down a lot of threes, pummeling you in the paint. They're 7-1 straight up and against the spread in their last 8 games, despite the fact that they have only won the turnover margin once in that span. The loss came to, obviously, Purdue in the Big Ten title. So, similar to Illinois, styles make fights, right? Similar to Illinois, Michigan is not a team that forces a lot of turnovers. I just told you they lose the turnover battle, yet they still win. They don't force a lot of turnovers, and that's one of the reasons why they lose the turnover battle so often. The UConn guards, I think, should be relatively comfortable in this game. Again, Michigan doesn't play that pressure defense that forces you into a lot of turnovers. And I think if UConn can be comfortable handling the ball, that's going to be a big factor in this game. And if they can limit those turnovers again, they're going to have to. They're going to have to win the turnover margin. I think if Michigan wins the turnover margin in this game and makes 10 threes, I think they cover easily. Dusty May, he's going to take away UConn's best weapon. That's what he did to Arizona, right? He is the Bill Belichick of college basketball coaches. Arizona was an interior team. They didn't like to shoot the three. So what did Dusty May do? He packed the paint and forced the Wildcats outside. They actually shot 35% from three, which is just below their season average of 36%, but they only had 6 total makes out of 17 attempts. That's more attempts than they're used to taking, and that's because they kind of played right into Michigan's hand. So the thing about Arizona, 37% from 2-point range in that game on Saturday night. That was 17% below their season average. So May said, we're not going to let you beat us in the paint. You shoot 54% in the paint. We're going to force tough shots in the paint. And they did. And Arizona only made 37% of their 2-point shots in the game, well below their season average. So May took away their best scoring weapon. Arizona gets 57% of their scoring from the inside. That's the 14th most in the country. 20% of their scoring from 3-point. 360th out of 365 Division I teams. So it was kind of easy to determine we're going to take the paint away from Arizona. Dusty May knew if you take the paint away, you force Arizona outside, you're probably going to win the game. UConn's a bit tougher of a handicap. They're more of a balanced team. They're in the 120th to 150th range in both 2-point and 3-point distribution categories. So what does Dusty May take away in this game? My guess is Terrace Reed. That's what I would take away. He looks like the most effective player on UConn's roster when it comes to getting efficient and quick buckets. He is a beast in the paint. The good news for Michigan is they have multiple bodies to throw at Terrace Reed. We'll see how healthy Yaxel is, but Mara, Johnson, these are big bodies that can wear down Terrace Reed in the paint. I think the guard play obviously is going to be crucial for UConn because if they collapse on Terrace Reed, that means Karaban and Mullins. I think Michigan has to be content with those guys shooting threes on the outside. Michigan's defense has been susceptible to the three this year. They defend the paint really well, but they have been prone to giving up a lot of 3-point attempts. To be fair, they've been ahead in a lot of games, so teams are chucking and ducking. But I've watched a lot of games this year where Michigan's given up a lot of open shots on the 3-point line. So if Karaban, Mullins, Solo Ball, will check his health, of course, the ankle injury. If those guys can knock down threes, that's where UConn, I think, is dangerous in this game. And I think they're going to collapse on Reed. And I think Karaban, I mean, let's be honest, Mullins is like Mr. Clutch. And Karaban's won 2 national titles. So I think there's a chance that UConn can keep it close by making some perimeter shots. They're going to have to. Because Michigan's probably going to make at least 9 or 10. So I do think UConn's live in this game. But they've got to do 2 things. They've got to control the 3-point line. And they've got to control the turnover battle. Those are the 2 key metrics for me that UConn must win. Just like they did on Saturday against Illinois. They made 12 threes to Illinois 6. That's a plus 18 net scoring margin on the 3-point line. And they were plus 4 in the turnover margin. They've got to be positive in both categories on Monday night. But I think they've got a chance to do it. I really do. Michigan's the better team. They should win. Just like the Seahawks were the better team over the Patriots. They should have won, and they did. You never know with these games. And UConn's got a lot of Team of Destiny vibes, so I would not put it past the Huskies to pull this upset off. It's reminding me very much of what they did in 2014 with Kemba Walker, the hungry, hungry Huskies. This is a dangerous team. This is a dangerous team. But again, it's all about how many threes UConn can allow. Because when they give up 10 or more in a game this year, they're 0-4 against the spread. So I think that's the key. It's going to be fun. It's been a fun tourney. I know that the Final 4 games were kind of duds. The UConn game had some moments. Mullins hit that 3 late, which kind of sealed it. But the Arizona game, obviously, they didn't really bring much. I think it's been a really, I think it's been a fun tourney. It's been an insightful tourney. Just keep taking chalk, guys. Next year, we'll be back on the horn again next year for it. But if you just keep taking chalk, I think you're going to be in good shape. Speaking of chalk, the women's natty, I mean, goodness gracious, all 4 1 seeds make it. Same 4 Final Four teams as last year. UCLA, dominating performance today over South Carolina. Congrats to the Bruins. I did not expect UCLA to snap the Big Ten basketball national championship drought, right? We haven't had a men's tourney champion since Michigan State in 01. I think it was Purdue in 99 was the last women's Big Ten winner. But UCLA, of all teams, your first Big Ten basketball winner in men or women in over 25 years. Congrats to the Bruins. I think the one takeaway from the tournament was the unders, especially later in the tournament when the intensity of the play heightened. You saw TSS, tight sphincter syndrome, take control. The unders went 4-0 in the Elite Eight, 2-0 in the Final Four, and then depending on what number you got, you hit under in the national championship game. So that game was 133.5 at open, and then it got bet down to 127.5, and the game landed right smack in the middle, 130, 79-51 final. It was an our bettor's dream scenario, right? We talk about our betting all the time. I can't even speak. Arbitrage betting is when you know a number's going to move, so you bet one side of it, and then it moves, and then you bet the other side of it, and then it lands right in the middle. And in this case, you had multiple opportunities to do that throughout the course of the game. In the quarter, in the half, this game was played pretty much to a T, right? The unders were all the rage in the Final Four and the Elite Eight, so of course when this total dropped, you knew it was coming down, and it did, but it came down too much. It dropped over 5 points. And usually that means it's dropped too much. So obviously in a market like women's basketball that doesn't have a ton of heavy hitters in it, those totals can move. And I think the totals really, that's how you attack these women's tourneys. You find these games that you know are high leverage and have good defenses, and you just absolutely hammer the unders. So that concludes our college basketball portion of the show. It's been fun. College hoops, obviously, it's a short sprint. Basically, we do two months of it, from Super Bowl until now, and then it's over. And then we'll do it again next year. And I'll be honest, it's a sport that I enjoy betting, but I feel like every year I start later and later. And I was up. I mean, I'm not going to have any major positions open for tomorrow. I have a unit on UConn, but I'm going to finish up for the tourney. I'm going to finish up for college basketball season. I mean, if you were going to tell me in 2 months, let's check the ROI. I'm up 8% ROI in the tourney. I'm up, about 2.5% ROI for the college basketball season. For 2 months, I'll take 2% ROI. Obviously, in the 3 weeks of the tourney, 8% is great. I really should only bet. Honestly, I say this about college football. If I only bet bowl season, I would be up every year. But you can't do that. I give out picks all year long, so I got to bet it all. But I always do well during bowl season. I always do well during conference tourneys and the NCAA tourney. For example, conference tournaments up 4.3 units. NCAA tourney up 8.4. If I only bet conference and NCAA tourneys, I would be up almost 13 units in 4 weeks. That's all I should do. But the regular season, we do this for a living, and we're on all these shows. We want to bet. We like to bet. But in reality, if you narrow the sample to the things that you know you do well, what do I do well? What are my strengths? I'm a good situational handicapper. I understand ebbs and flows of how games start, finish, the situations in between, how those situations affect the market from game to game. And it's easier to do when there's fewer games and the news is more sharp. The news is more, hard hitting because it's later on in the season and everything's amplified. Everything matters. Where in the regular season, sometimes headlines can get dismissed. Sometimes they fall through the cracks. I do well in the bowl seasons. I do well in the conference tournaments. I do well in the NCAA tourney. If I only bet those things, I would do much better than what I typically do in my other sports. But that's where your ego comes into play. All right, let's get to the quick NFL news. So the big story this week, Kirk Cousins signing with the Falcons. And some people thought maybe this was a move of the Falcons. Excuse me. Scratch that. Kirk Cousins signs with the Raiders. He was on the Falcons. I'm sorry. It's been a long week. Kirk Cousins signs with the Raiders. That is the story of the week in the NFL. I like this, honestly. I thought it is a low-risk, high-reward type signing for Vegas, where they bring in an experienced quarterback to mentor Fernando Mendoza. And make no mistake, this move has nothing to do with them drafting Fernando Mendoza and everything to do with them wanting some insurance. So when they draft Mendoza and he either struggles out of camp or doesn't pick up the playbook right away, they have a veteran option that they can go to. Because let's be honest, when you look at this Raiders roster, the Raiders roster isn't too shabby right now. And we talked about it a few weeks ago, right? When they signed when they traded Max Crosby, they signed all these other players: Tyler Linderbaum, Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Naylor, Kwity Paye, Eric Stokes, Malcolm Kuntz. They traded for Teron Johnson. And then the trade for Max Crosby fell through. And then you think to yourself, well, are they going to rescind their contracts with any of these players? No, they kept all of them. And they still have Max Crosby. And they still have the top of the second round to take their pick there. And now they have a quarterback in Kirk Cousins who can probably start week 1. And I would say he'd be the favorite to start week 1 right now. I don't think you're in a rush to push Mendoza into this situation. See how the O-line responds. See how Genty and Bowers are doing. See if Cousins gets any early traction with those guys and can catch lightning in a bottle. Because when you look at the Raiders' win total at 5.5, go look at the other win totals for teams that low. Jets, Dolphins, Cardinals, those teams do not have the types of rosters that the Raiders do. The Raiders, of the teams that have a win total of 5.5, the Raiders have the best roster of all those teams. They have a better roster than the Jets. They have a better roster than the freaking Dolphins, who keep getting rid of players left and right. They have a better record than the Cardinals. So I think the Raiders over is a bet for me in the win total markets. Now, we don't have to make it now. I'm not too concerned about making it right now. Let's see how the rest of the draft shake out. Let's see how information we get. Like, I don't think there's a bunch of people that are just going to run into the window to bet the Raiders win total over. But that is on my early radar. I'm interested to see what the schedule is. I'd love it if they had some easier games early on. Whenever I'm betting overs, especially for teams that are supposed to be bad, I'd love to get a win or two early to get that tanking stench off the team. So I'm not in a rush. We'll see what the schedule looks like. But, man, I'll tell you what, that Raiders roster with a win total of 5.5 and a comparable, at least somewhat maybe mediocre quarterback under center in Cousins, you can make worse bets. Speaking of the draft, I'm very excited to release this project that I've been working on soon. So basically what I've been doing, and I'll give you a hint of it now. Basically what I've been doing is I've been going back and compiling data and odds of prior NFL drafts. And I've been putting together some graphs and some charts of position totals, position groups, the odds of each team to draft a certain position, what the GM tendencies are, what the GMs did last year. And I just think all of those things are very interesting to me when you're making bets on who's going to get taken in the first round of this NFL draft, which is typically where I live when I'm betting the draft. A great example of this is the offensive line. So the thing that I've learned from doing this research is the average offensive line total for a first round offensive lineman selected is about 7. So in an average offensive line draft, there should be 7. The number should be 7, and there should be about 7 taken. Well, the number this year is 7.5, and we have a really good offensive line class, arguably the deepest of any position group. So right there tells me I'm betting offensive linemen over 7.5 in the first round. Like, this is the type of analysis that I'm just curious about. That doesn't mean I'm going to bet everything that I see on here, but I just want to have the data. And there's not a database right now of NFL draft data, betting data that's out there. So I decided to create one in a rudimentary fashion, and I'm going to release some of it probably the week before the draft. I'll probably release it to the Patreon subscribers early. I'll probably post a snippet of it on social media to tease it and, pump it up a little bit. And then I'll probably post the full thing in addition to my mock draft and who I think everyone's going to take and all of my draft bets probably a few days before the draft. Probably, first rounds on that Thursday, probably that weekend or Monday or somewhere in that range. So keep a lookout for that over the next couple of weeks. We will use this draft betting guide as a tool on this podcast to talk about the draft, to talk about what I'm betting on, and so on and so forth. And I'm excited. I mean, this is a fun project. I'll keep adding to this project every year. This is one of those things that, is like a perennial annual project for me. It'll go into the cycle of my NFL work in the off season, and I'm very excited to share it with you coming up soon. But that's really all I've got for this show. Relatively quick show, in about 30 minutes, and good luck in the national championship game on Monday. Of course, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the Patreon, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do all those things. We are trying to grow. We have some fun things on the horizon, but I need your help. I really do. I need you guys to subscribe and rate and review and give it all the click all the buttons. The people who follow me, they say that 80% of your content is for 20% of your audience. So there are a lot of people out there who follow me religiously. I see the same people liking my tweets, liking my posts, supporting my work. I need you to keep doing that. I appreciate all of it. I see all of it. Trust me. I might not be able to respond to every comment. I might not be able to reciprocate every time you support me, but trust me, I'm tracking all of it. And every time you do subscribe, every time you do give me a positive review, every time you do give me positive feedback, it fills my cup. It makes me want to work that much harder for you guys. And the harder I work, the better information I can give you. And the more entertaining the podcast can be, and the more interesting this passion project of mine can be. So keep supporting me. I love you all. I hope you have a happy Easter, happy Passover, and I will see you next week as NFL draft season officially begins. That is all for episode 30 of The Morning After.